Good afternoon. Good? Happy Diwali to you guys. Yeah. So it's over, right? But anyway, so the festivities continue over the weekend, I think. Anyway, so I'm so glad that you're here today. How many of you are students at SMU? Okay. Some of you are known as staff, right? So, okay, good. So again, so this looks like it might be the last one for this year, Healing. So my name is Srini Reddy. I'm a professor of marketing here, and I head the center called Center for Marketing Excellence. And one of the tasks that we do have is bring excellent industry speakers to the forum so that they actually share the best practices in an exciting field. I mean, marketing has become even more exciting because it does not just deal with selling soda pop or cosmetics or shampoo and so on. And even that is becoming much more exciting, okay? Yeah. The digital sort of a phenomenon that occurred since 1990s essentially has changed the way that we do things. And particularly, I think, where Liam essentially is going to talk about today is the advent of the mobile. Yeah, the mobile device which we carry in our pockets all the time essentially has the power which is much more than the supercomputer that was there hardly 30 years ago, right? The supercomputer would fill a room this size and probably do less computationally than what your little smartphone can do. Okay, now so that is the genesis of what we are sort of trying to do. And yesterday, I don't know if you were able to make it. Yesterday we had a speaker from Twitter, yeah, and I think we tried to bring the latest set of guys. And so Liam and we go a long way. I mean, I think Liam, you've been involved with the Digital Works program for several years.
Yes.
Yeah. So Liam actually is a managing partner at Mobile Now, which is still a part of the Omnicom group. Right?
No, we're actually independent.
Huh?
We're independent.
Okay, so you
But work with them, yes.
Yes. Yeah, but originally it has been a part of
I used to work for Omnicom, yes.
Omnicom. Yeah. So Mobile Now, and one of the relations that we had is we run a program every year called Digital Works. We just finished the 9th edition of it, which essentially talks about how the digital world has evolved. And we are partnered with the Omnicom Group, one of the largest ad agencies, which has a large digital practice. And so through that association, when Liam was at Omnicom, so he had participated in many of these programs. And so the outcome of one, which from last year, is a book which we're able to publish. And so Liam contributed one of his presentation essentially converted into one of the chapters. So, and while I'm at it, I'll tell you that there will be some lucky guys in this room who, based on the questions that they actually posed or the answers that they gave to questions that Liam has actually posed, will be given a book to take home. Okay. So anyway, so this is actually a fascinating exercise in terms of putting together some of the top minds in digital sort of a business. Essentially, we have about nine chapters which essentially talk about the progress in this. Okay, let me just briefly introduce Liam. As you know, you already seen his bio, and he has a vast experience in Asia. He's lived in Shanghai, here, and Delhi, I believe, before it got really muggy and hot and polluted. Yes. Right. So, but he is one of the leading international digital marketing experts that we know. He's had over 20 plus years of experience, and now I think what fascinates him, and I think the last time I heard, essentially is where the mobile essentially is changing the world, but more importantly, how the East is actually sort of leapfrogging the West. And many of the models, as we see it, essentially came from the West. And so we know that WhatsApp was the first one that came, and Facebook bought it. But now WeChat actually exceeds what WhatsApp can do. How many of you have WeChat? Okay. And as it turns out, if you go into China, everybody has WeChat. And WeChat has actually become a platform, on a mobile device. It's not just sending messages. It can do a lot more things. And so if you want to order a Didi Chuching taxi, so you can do that. You can actually have a pet, grooming services on it. So it becomes almost like an e-commerce platform on its own. So what's amazing about it, and I hope you'll address this, is that in the East, that's where exciting things are. It's not just WeChat, but Gojek. And so many of you might have heard of it, the Indonesian app is essentially hail taxis and motorbikes and so on to take you around. That is actually developed into your platform. Yeah, so actually anybody downloads Gojek, you'll see about 10 different apps inside, embedded in that app that you can do. Nowhere else you would see it. I just have spent the last 6 months in the US on my sabbatical, and I come back and every day there's some change. So Gojek is a great example. There's another payment service in India called Paytm, again a mobile payment system, and that is also developing not just to pay, but essentially develop into an e-commerce platform as well. So these are the exciting things that I see in the East and not as much in the West. And so anyway, so that is the focus of it. So anyway, so I've introduced in terms of what Liam actually has a passion for, and I think let's hear from him in terms of what his thoughts are and how these things are involved. Thank you. Yeah, welcome. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Srini.
Yeah.
I know it's Friday, it's lunchtime. I think everyone's got food and drinks, so I don't want to interrupt lunch too much. I'd just like to really share an update in terms of where we see mobile progressing, kind of now, so in terms of 2018, 2019, and in particular, to Dr. Srini's point, what may be lessons of what insights we can see that's happening in China, which will play out now in South and Southeast Asia. So I'm just going to run you through the presentation now. I would welcome questions as you see fit. More questions the better. Interaction is definitely good, and happy to come off any points or take feedback on some of the points that you see as users or that you kind of have particular interest in. Okay, so really want to give a bit of an overview in terms of where mobile is in general, just in terms of as an interface that we use on a day-to-day basis, and then probably dive deeper into where mobile is in terms of China, and then have reference from that in terms of how that can apply to us here in Singapore and Southeast Asia. So I think Dr. Srini touched on this, just some statistics to back this up. We've certainly seen mobile become the predominant way that we interface with the internet, and this kind of tipping point has taken place in many markets in recent years, where more people are accessing the internet now from a mobile device than they are from a PC. So a lot of these kind of more high-level stats, just to give you an overview of where we are. And I think most of these insights you'll probably be fairly familiar with. This stats come from the US, and it's amusing, interesting, and insightful. It's a statistic or a question that was asked in terms of what would you as a user be prepared to give up if it allowed you to keep your mobile with you. So in terms of how important is mobile to you, some people said they'd stop seeing a few of their friends. Some people said they'd put off going on vacation. Some people said even a third they'd go without having sex in terms of being able to keep their mobile phone. So it's kind of, this is quite amusing, but I think it's also quite intrinsic in terms of how mobile has become, an extension of our everyday life. And I think sometimes when you're in a meeting or you're in a class and you have to put your mobile away for just an hour, sometimes that's quite a hard task to kind of do, and it really has become that extension of our life, that kind of thing we probably look at last time before we go to bed, and quite often first thing when we wake up in the morning. That's how mobile has evolved, for better, for worse. So going forward in terms of data, yes, mobile, and in particular smartphones have become omnipresent. And I think what we've seen in many parts of developing Asia Pacific is the rise of smartphones versus feature phones. So initially, obviously phones were everywhere. They tended to be kind of feature phones in terms of the classic Nokia style small kind of device. But now primarily through cheaper manufacturing both in China and to a less extent in India, smartphones have become a lot more prevalent. So even in a lot of the more developed markets, whether it's Myanmar, whether it's Bangladesh, a lot of people will have their first phone will be a smartphone. It'll be a very basic smartphone, but it'll be a smartphone none the same, and it'll open up the internet to them. In the same way that when we had our first internet experiences 10, 15, 20 years ago, probably on a on a PC here. A lot of people now have that first experience via a mobile device. So again, Dr. Srini touched upon this back in the day in terms of the ecosystem was all about kind of workstations, PCs. The ecosystem now is mobile. It really is that kind of device that kind of connects us to everything else around the world. So if everyone kind of has a mobile, what are people doing on their mobile in particular? This is data from Asia. It's from last year, and it's looking at what typically users use their mobile devices for. And it's interesting to see the different types of usage they have, and also the different usage across markets. So I guess a lot of people are using it from a messaging perspective. Also kind of a video as well, gaming, and banking services as well. I think the interesting thing here is if we look at probably the more developed markets versus the lesser developed markets, you'll see the impact of, I guess, infrastructure within those markets. So in kind of Singapore, in Hong Kong, Thailand, Malaysia, where there's pretty good infrastructure and 4G technology, very easy to stream videos. Very easy to stream videos. In the less developed markets where people are still running on GPRS or 2.5, 3G, less possible to run videos. So you'll see that's a big change in terms of the data set for mobile. Increasingly that's changing. I mean, basically everyone's kind of moving forward towards 4G, even 5G will be on our doorstep quite soon, and that is enabling users to kind of stream video pretty much 24/7. And the cost of data has obviously come down as it's become a lot more mature, so it's really not a problem to kind of sit on a plane, on a bus, and kind of watch a video for hour and a half, that sort of thing. Now, we also talk about what we kind of do on mobile, and we've become, I guess, a lot more focused in terms of what we do on mobile. I think back in the day we probably had a portfolio of apps, and we kind of downloaded loads and loads of apps. We kind of discovered new apps. We got very excited about them. But then, what actually happens from a day-to-day basis is that we actually use very, very few apps. So the data coming out from a global perspective is that kind of 9 apps are used on a daily basis. Data from the US saying there's 3 apps are used on a daily basis. I think if we think about that ourselves, it's probably very true. We'd have a social media app that we'll probably use, or maybe 2. Facebook, probably WhatsApp here to a lesser extent, same to WeChat. We'll probably have maybe a news portal that we'll kind of use on a regular basis. We may have a weather app. We may have a particular game that we're kind of playing with at the moment. And that tends to be maybe the most common apps that kind of sit within our portfolio. Yes, we'll download more, play with them, maybe delete them. It tends to be kind of a very few select apps that we kind of use on a regular basis. And this has an impact on marketeers, which I'll go to later, in terms of how they reach out to consumers. Now let's talk about mobile platforms as a kind of spin-off directly from that. So in essence, this is driven from marketeers or from a brand perspective. How does a brand communicate to a user via a mobile phone? Because we now know that all users are using mobile phones, so it becomes very important for brands to reach out to users. What are the options open to brands? So the traditional way has always been native app. So to create a native app, and this is getting on for pretty much 10 years now since the first iPhone came out. The first iPhone came out with together with the infrastructure of native apps, and everyone pretty much started downloading apps. And apps are still a fantastic way for a brand to communicate with the user. Now, what happens subsequently is that, and this is driven back to the improvement on infrastructure. Because data speeds increased, users were able to kind of access mobile websites and access them quite quickly. So you're able to kind of pull down data from that. So HTML5 sites became very, very prevalent and still are. It varies in terms of market by market, but often a H5 site or a mobile website is a very good way to interact with a brand. The obvious benefit being that you don't need to go through the app download process to be able to access the content that you do need. Now the third player in the mix has been the messaging platform play, and it's mostly been born out of WeChat. We'll go into a lot more detail on this later. So this is what we see now is that brands have 3 ways to kind of reach out to consumers. They can go native, they can go H5, or they can go via a messaging platform. Now, the benefits of each I would summarize as follows. So the app is still probably the richest, the nicer experience. If you really want to kind of have an optimal interaction with the user, really can't beat that. It's a good way to go. The H5 site is obviously its instantaneity in terms of being able to kind of access it very, very, very quickly. Common platforms, no need to kind of deploy across multiple platforms. And similarly with a messaging platform, deployment is always very easy to access. The user can kind of get straight into the content and interact with the brand that way. So what this kind of gives us is a bit of a consideration set. So as marketeers, how should we go about planning our kind of our mobile strategy or mobile rollouts? Now, there's a number of different criteria we should give consideration to. What are our objectives as a brand? What do we want to achieve in a particular year, and how can mobile help us deliver that? So, mobile still, although it's become a lot more prevalent, it still has things that it does very well and things that it maybe doesn't do so well. So, for example, if a brand is looking to raise awareness, they're looking to launch a new product, still in many markets, particularly in Southeast Asia, TV is fantastic. TV and outdoor work very, very well. And mobile's not really aimed to kind of challenge that. So you need to kind of think about how mobile fits into the entire mix. So in terms of working out what your channel deployments are, where does mobile fit? Where does it fit naturally? And we're going to help you with my KPIs. As a brand as well, and this is a bit of a legacy of what we're going into later. It's definitely important to see what has a brand done already. What's already in existence? Is there a need to reinvent the wheel, or can I leverage something that's out there already? So why create another app if there's an app out there already? If there's a H5 site, why don't I add to that site rather than looking to recreate it? The next point is looking at what type of content do I need to give to the user. So the content's very rich. A native app is perfect because you have the app content downloads already, so it's very easy to access, and you're not relying upon download speed. If it doesn't need to be so rich, and you want to allow users to get to it very, very quickly, then H5 or messaging platform works very well. Consideration also should be given to this is quite a key point in terms of establishing an always-on strategy. So what I mean by that is mobile needing to be continuous. So you don't have an initial push on mobile, say for a particular campaign, then you drop mobile and you push it again, then you drop it. So it's very important to keep mobile on all the time. So we'll show some examples of this later. Don't have a particular app that focuses on Christmas. Don't have an app that focuses on Spring Festival, etc. Think about mobile as always being on, and then dropping respective content and messaging throughout the calendar year. And finally, timings and budgets is a key consideration. So what this allows you to do is look, based on your objective, to give consideration to what's the best platform for me? What's probably the best primary platform for me? So something very, very simple would be HTML5 landing page. In terms of quite basic, but simple. Then to get more sophisticated, you can go down the messaging platform in terms of something like WeChat, or indeed a H5 site. Or a mini program. I'll touch on mini programs a little bit later. If you want the richest involvement and you have a reasonable budget, then the native app still remains the best platform for deployment. Now, increasingly, it's not really a choice of which platform to go down. Most brands need to be omnipresent. They need to be across all platforms. So whichever way the consumer decides to reach out to them, the brand is there already. This kind of gives you a bit of a framework in terms of the benefits of one versus the other, and maybe how it should be prioritized. Particularly useful if you're within a startup organization, you're kind of building a mobile strategy from the beginning. Which way do you kind of go? Now, we've touched on this in a few points already. I'm able to go into a little bit more detail now. And this is what we're seeing as the new battleground within mobile. So apps have been around for quite some time, responsive webs have been around for quite some time, but messaging platforms is probably the new kind of battleground, the new area that's becoming increasingly interesting. And Professor Srini kind of gave a bit of a straw poll earlier in terms of asking what everyone kind of uses from a day-to-day basis. And there is a distinct geographic split in terms of North America and parts of Europe are very much Facebook focused. A lot of other parts of Europe Africa, and parts of Asia, been very WhatsApp focused. And then there's kind of outlier in terms of Eastern Asia being WeChat focused. But when you look at the data, and this is data from the last 12 months, even though WeChat is primarily a one market phenomenon, it almost has the same number of monthly active users as both WhatsApp and Facebook. And I think I would encourage all of you, particularly from a marketing knowledge and learning perspective, get yourselves onto WeChat, play with it, experiment with it if you're not on there already, and you'll probably understand how it's becoming a lot more prevalent. And what we kind of see happening with WeChat is we think, and this is almost the premise of the presentation, is that the West is now looking to see what's happening on this platform and will likely take learnings from that. So I think WhatsApp for sure, I mean, hasn't really evolved in, I don't know how long, almost hasn't really evolved since this kind of come out. It will evolve. I think Facebook messaging is evolving slowly, has actually moved on. But I think lessons will definitely be taken from what's happening in the Eastern markets by the Western big players. Just a pause for thought. Any questions or comments so far? Yes.
So if I download WeChat, should I have any concerns regarding privacy when I use it?
Very good point. Very good point. I think the respect of privacy and the way of governing privacy, as well as the oversight by government, varies from an East to a Western perspective. I think we've kind of seen from a Western perspective, data has become increasingly important, and there's a very high regard for that. I wouldn't say in the East that is disregarded, and China now has new cybersecurity laws, which is really starting to address data privacy in terms of data needs to be kept within China, it can't be stored offshore or anything like that. So China's definitely catching up from that perspective. However, the one area where I think there'll always be a gap will be government oversight. So in terms of your data may well be secure within China, but you're still going to have government oversight of that. So if you get back to your question, if you download a WeChat, you can be reasonably secure. Your data is probably not going to be leaked to a third party or anything like that. That's solid. However, there could be a degree of oversight in terms of the content that's going through on that WeChat perspective. I think as someone being based outside of China, don't really think it's an issue to be concerned about. But there will, for sure, be some level of monitoring on that traffic. So, good question. Okay, so this kind of yes.
Give him the book. Yeah. It's a great question.
Yeah.
It's an autographed copy.
Actually, there is one catch here which I think you haven't shared with him. So
Yeah.
when you download any mobile app,
Yes.
they have their own previous terms and conditions, and this terms and condition talks about the privacy as well. So especially if you are an European user, the GDPR is the one which is effective there. So they have protected their interests always, and unless and until you accept, they will not let you go and use it. So it's your own choice. Data privacy is definitely will be compromised to an extent, but they protect by asking you to accept TNCs, and TNCs are where you've given your consent to use your data by the app. So they are very smart. All mobile apps are very smart. Unless and until you accept those TNCs, they will never let you to use the app. So you have to be, and most of us, we don't ever go through and read it properly.
Yes.
We just say yes, correct? So you better read it that properly.
That's your point. Exactly. It's not that they're not being compliant.
They are
They give it to you, and you're just, as a user, you kind of don't really have much choice. So no, it's a very fair point as well. Okay, so I think this brings us to the crux of the presentation in terms of the West finally working out that there is some exciting things, some innovative things happening in the East, and kind of finally working out that Facebook or WhatsApp is in the center of the universe. I think this is where times are exciting to be based here and to understand what's happening in this space. So I think this is quite a good overview kind of in terms of how things have kind of changed. So this is looking at basically the biggest parties or the biggest players from a global capitalization perspective. And what we've kind of seen is that 9 of the top 20 are now Chinese. If we go back only 5 years ago, there was only 2 Chinese entities on this list. And this is also borne out by, if you speak to someone in the West, they've actually started to hear of Alibaba, they've started to hear of Tencent. So they're starting to wake up, and that knowledge is taking place, both from a financial perspective and also from a just a general understanding of what is happening. Now this is a point that kind of touches a little bit on the area you brought up beforehand. And I think it's very important. The mindset of many users. I think the Chinese users and Southeast Asian users. I think there'll be a lot of commonalities. There's a willingness for users to be happy to share things about them if they see an immediate benefit for that. And I think many users in the West, they're a little bit more skeptical about that. Now this openness definitely helps innovation in terms of being able to share information, allows an acceleration of product, of technology and feedback. And this type of environment is definitely kind of almost separates Asia from many other areas of the world. And it's really allowed kind of brands to diversify, to add further services to their offering, and really evolve very quickly. So we've touched upon this. I'll go into this in a little bit more detail in terms of this idea of mobile omnipresent, and what we'll dive into now is kind of how WeChat is providing this third mobile channel for brands to communicate via. So what it's really done is it's provided a similar experience to users, but operating within a WeChat environment. So it's kind of almost like you're within WeChat and you want to find out a little bit more about the brand, and you can do all that interaction or have those conversations or have that product information transfer, knowledge transfer happening within WeChat. And this is probably borne out quite a lot in terms of m-commerce or e-commerce, to use a general term. A lot of global brands were realizing that Chinese consumers are spending huge amounts of time on WeChat, and if they want to engage with that brand, there's no point trying to send them to download an app to look at purchasing something. That needs to kind of have that presence on WeChat. So these are examples, and it's particularly prevalent in the luxury space, where brands have had to use the WeChat channel and allow e-commerce and other type of app-type functionalities to take place within that WeChat space. So in essence, what you're able to do from a WeChat perspective is to be able to do almost anything that you could do on a native app or a H5 experience within WeChat. Now, what this kind of touches into the thinking that kind of goes in and separates the Western way of thinking from an Eastern way of thinking. So typically in the West, if you're trying to find out, and this is also I think prevalent to some extent here in Singapore, if you're trying to find out a little bit more about a brand, you'll probably do a little bit of a Google search. You'll find out a little bit more information about the product. You'll then go to typically a mobile website where you may download an app and find out a little bit more about it. In the East, the user will typically go on WeChat. They'll try and find that brand within WeChat and then have the interaction with WeChat. So it's a slightly different way of kind of thinking, just because WeChat has become an all-encompassing environment that allows everything to be done within WeChat. Very similar to how AOL was maybe 10, 15 years ago. Yes?
What is the role of the search engine that they use in China? I don't remember the name.
So there's a standard search engine in terms of Baidu, but then WeChat have also brought through their own search engine. So you can kind of search it within WeChat, and that will give you access to articles that brand has published. So there's a kind of battle in terms of going on for users, even just within China. So I think Tencent battles with Alibaba, battles with Baidu as well, the big three, the BAT, so to speak. So what Tencent have been trying to do is to try and keep everyone within WeChat, and now WeChat has a pretty good search. You may find out more about a brand in particular. So they're able to do a search. They're able to search for a brand, in this case Mont Blanc. They're able to find the Mont Blanc official account, get more information about that. Then within Mont Blanc, they're able to access access a We Boutique or a We Shop within Montblanc, and then they're able to browse content from in this case the sister product IWC, and you see a whole kind of interaction. I'll show you the site here in terms of how users are interacting all within WeChat. So the user hasn't left WeChat at all. They're able to do everything. They're able to see content that is quite typical of a mobile app or a HTML5 site, but just within WeChat. They haven't even had to go to Baidu to do search in the first place. So it's become, I guess, it's a battle for control in terms of trying to keep everything happening. We see that also with Facebook. In terms of Facebook, you might search for a brand within Facebook. You might have a customer service issue on a particular brand. Probably you're sick of sitting on the line for so long. I'd go on Facebook, make a post, and you'll go through that site. That cycle. So similar type of perspective within WeChat from a China point of view. So this is just an example of a We Shop in China. So basically, you're able to browse content. You're able to kind of purchase content and download content from there. Now, what's become quite interesting here is that the m-commerce platform within China has evolved quite differently to the West. So, in essence, it has been, and there are also some parallels. In essence, for brands in China to have an m-commerce platform, they pretty much had to list on one of the existing players. So whether someone like JD.com or Taobao or something like that, they had to have a listing there. There's no point in them having an independent m-commerce platform, which is something they would typically do in the West, just because all Chinese users were used to going to JD or Taobao to kind of search for a particular brand. They wouldn't go and have a dedicated site. What WeChat has done by empowering brands to have their own shop within WeChat that they control is that it gives a lot more ownership back to the brand to be able to have that interaction with users. The slight challenge that brands face is when they're on a kind of a marketplace is that users would search for a particular brand, they go through to purchase, and suddenly JD would pop up. You've looked at this, you might be interested in this is got cheap, and then should present a competitor brand. So that's very, very typical of marketplaces. So by brands having the opportunity via Tencent now to have their own store, they're in a lot more control. They're in control of the inventory, they're in control of pricing, and they're also in control of how they compete against competitors. So it's become quite interesting, and almost emancipated brands back to be able to take the lead. Yes.
If there are now other apps included in WeChat in China, isn't this a threat for the app store from?
Absolutely.
And I know American companies can't do much in China, but isn't Apple? Can they do anything about that?
We'll dive into this in a little bit later because it's touching on basically what's referred to as a mini program, and which in essence is a kind of micro app or a mini app. It's definitely a challenge, and I think Apple has kind of woken up to that, to kind of being the portal for interacting with brands and needing to download things. Suddenly now there's now an alternative. It's almost been Apple domination for kind of 10 years, and now it's basically the tide is turning a little bit. I think what we're starting to see on many programs, we'll go into this a bit more detail, is definitely a challenge to Apple for sure. The dynamic with Android is slightly different, given the ban on kind of Google entities within China. There's always been alternative app stores for Android products in China, but Apple hasn't really been impacted by this, but they've certainly been impacted by Tencent. Okay. Coming back to this is more of a generalization, but it's also applicable to China. Touched on some of the points we made earlier, is that sometimes from a mobile perspective, less is actually more. So we've seen this. I hope there's no one here from a financial services perspective, but I think going back 8-10 years ago, banks loved apps. They had apps for absolutely everything. You kind of went to the app store and there's an app for my credit card, an app for my rewards, an app for going overseas, many different apps. It wasn't kind of app crazy. It was kind of good. It's always good when industries embrace new technologies, and financial services guys were definitely one of the first players to do that. But what happened? It became a little bit confusing for the consumer. consumer goes to the app store, they want to download a particular app, and suddenly they see 3 or 4 different apps from say DBS. Which app should I really download if I want to check my latest account balance or something like that? So what we've seen in the last few years is a consolidation of apps and a kind of creation of a super app. Probably the best example that I can share of this is a global app. It's from Starbucks. So basically, you can use a Starbucks app to pay at the store. You can pre-order if you want to. You can find out what music is playing in the store. You can also check your loyalty situation in terms of points and things like that. You can gift. You can do store locator, all from a single app. So suddenly, I just have a single app that allows me to do everything. Now, it's not just a phenomenon that takes place in North America. We're also seeing this increasingly in Asian markets. This is an example from China for KFC. So KFC had a similar type of challenge. They had a delivery app, a marketing app, a coupon app, and it's like a lot of different apps. And again, consumers are a little bit confused. So what this led to was the creation of a super app. So basically, it allows all this functionality to be combined within a single app. It does create quite a challenge for a designer to come up and be able to manage the different user journeys. So the UX really becomes very, very important. So it could be a user coming in who wants to find out where their nearest KFC is. So they should be able to access their content very, very quickly. It could be a consumer that was coming in and try and place an order. They should equally be able to access their content very easy. So it becomes more of a challenge. How do I squeeze all this information into a single app and still make it relatively user-friendly? And that's what we're starting to see for a lot of these more mature players. They do this consolidation, and they do have this kind of UX review to make sure it all kind of works fairly autonomously. Fortunately, the banks have also done that. In terms of they've got a lot simpler now, where there's typically now there's a single app to cover most things financially. So let's touch on the point that's brought up earlier in terms of this new kind of phenomenon that's coming, which is mini programs. So mini programs are a kind of an app within the WeChat environment. We'll go through some examples in a little bit more detail later. So they've been around for just over a year. They were kind of launched but didn't really take off. The Tencent had a lot bigger push for them, and they've now become really kind of in demand and heavily used both by users and both by brands. And absolutely, this is a challenge to Apple for sure, without a shadow of a doubt. So, what are they? So they are in essence a kind of almost like a micro app or an app-like experience that takes place within WeChat. Now, they won't necessarily do everything that an app will do. They may just put out some of the key functionalities because they need to be a little bit lighter in size. They can't do everything. So they'll probably just pull out a core functionality within an app and do that. Now, in many cases, you'll have brands that would have a suite of mini apps. So they have a suite of mini programs that do different things depending on what the user needs. Because they're instantly accessible, they don't have the download access. They're already cached from a Tencent perspective, so the user can kind of access the app very, very easily. So they're really for a kind of maybe light, a one-off usage. They're not necessarily designed to completely replace apps, but they're empowered to create that instant activity to kind of get the information that I need from an immediate perspective. They're also discovered, so you can also search, pull them out very easily in the same way that you're searching for other content. So sometimes when you're searching for a particular brand, you may find their brand account or you may find their mini program first, depending on what you kind of search for. But ultimately, it does provide this app-like experience, which is why they have become such a challenger and proving so popular. So here's a few examples. C-Trip, or Trip as it's now known, also has functionality that allows you to do quite a lot of the flight searching, the hotel searching from within that mini app. Starbucks also have one themselves. This is just for gift carding. So they've taken a particular function of their regular app and just turned it into a mini program. In this instance, just on gift carding. A lot of the fashion brands have also kind of gone into mini programs as well, but they haven't necessarily offered a full e-commerce environment. They maybe selected a number of different items and they made that available, or they made it kind of a seasonal offering. In this case, for Spring Festival. Another example, in terms of a very handy function in terms of bus timetables. So being able to kind of access on the go, and not necessarily needing to download everything, but having a nice interface in terms of being able to query when buses might be available. So, and again, I may be going too deep here, but just to kind of explain the difference. So, brands will typically have what's referred to as a WeChat official account. This means that their official presence on WeChat, similar to what we see on Facebook, similar to what's also come out recently on WhatsApp. You have an official account. Many programs sit within that official account. So it's not kind of one or the other. You have your official account, then you have many programs associated with that official account. So for brands, it's not really a case of do I do one or do I do the other. You pretty much have to have WeChat official account as the platform. Then you can build mini programs on top of that as I see necessary. And again, I think this is where it's probably good as users because I think this is a perfect example of what we see happening in Asia that we think will now start to become relevant to other parts of the world. So I think it's very good in this instance on your WeChat account, to follow official brands, see what they're doing. Not all official brands are necessarily in simplified Chinese, so there are many international brands you can follow, and if you're not a native Chinese reader, that you can kind of play around with, and you can start to see what's happening. Because I think what we see here will start to become increasingly common, certainly on Facebook and maybe to a lesser extent on WhatsApp, if they look to reinvigorate their platform. Okay, this is a key point that's we've kind of mentioned slightly, but I'd like to go into a little bit more detail now. Is this kind of Eastern versus Western way of doing things from not just from a mobile perspective, but from an interaction perspective? What we kind of see is that, and it's a reflection of how infrastructure has evolved. What we've seen and it's not just true of China, it's true of many markets in Southeast Asia. Typically, if a Western eye looks at, say, a Chinese website, a Chinese portal, it looks very, very busy. It looks very, very cluttered. It looks like there's a lot going on. And I guess from a vice versa, if an Eastern eye looks at a Western perspective, it looks like there's loads of space not been utilised and maybe not been made the most of. Now, the reason for this kind of goes back down to early internet days, when, I don't know if anyone remember, but in terms of when you had to have a dial-up internet connection, and it kind of took a very, very long time for a page to load, the rationale for many markets, particularly in Asia, was that because it took so long to load, I couldn't really afford to have multiple pages loading. So I looked to put all the information that I needed onto a landing page. So that led to very, very busy landing pages, but effective landing pages. So I get a landing page, I see everything that I need from the landing page. So that mindset, that way of thinking has been maintained, even though bandwidth has increased and no one's using dial-up fortunately anymore. That kind of way of working is kind of maintained. So that's also borne out in terms of how people look to interact with the screen, in particular mobile screen as well. So here's some examples from e-commerce sites from a China perspective. And it's important for brands to understand the way in which users have been accustomed to think. So, for example, if we look at the top of the page, we have the search criteria. So everyone a user able to search for what they're looking for. Then we'll typically have a kind of carousel sitting below that will be highlighting promotions or latest activities. Then we'll get down to the main content, news, and then we'll have navigation at the bottom. So again, it looks very, very busy, but because all the big players operate this way, brands typically should follow this way of working if they want to interact with the consumer. Now, this makes it very interesting for international brands. So international brands come in, and I think this way of working is not just specific to China. I think it also impacts Southeast Asian markets where there will be a little bit more busy in size just because of that kind of internet evolution. So the challenge it creates to Western brands is if I was to lay out this information from an e-commerce perspective in the West, it would be probably somewhat quite different to this. So can I deploy what I've done in the West directly in the East? Advantages, disadvantages. The disadvantage is that if a brand tries to get the user to go through a different type of flow, whether it's on e-commerce or whether it's on F&B, the consumers are going to become a little bit confused or needing to learn a new way of working, and that's going to lead to either drop-off rates, calls to customer service, and that type of reaction. The other way of looking at it as well is that many international brands have a certain cachet. That's the reason why they often appeal, particularly in China. They have a cachet. So, to an international brand, being perceived in the same way as a local brand is sometimes disadvantageous. But sometimes a brand needs to strike a balance between following the norms in terms of interaction, but also making sure they maintain their heritage, so the users definitely perceive them as being a little bit more, I guess higher end or a little bit more different to what they have. We have exactly the same assignment that's currently going through the agency at the moment, where we have a Western coffee brand and they're looking to deploy in China, and they're really realising their interface is very much designed for the West. And they need to kind of think about, from an F&B delivery perspective, how should that be adapted to the Chinese consumer? It's not just a straight translation, it's a kind of, that way of working that's slightly different. And it is really trying to strike that balance between an Eastern philosophy and a Western philosophy from an interaction perspective. I think probably we see in Singapore, we probably see both aspects of this. Yes?
How much of influence would you say the demographic age group for each market would influence the way a brand would design for the mobile phone? Seeing that in the Western markets, it's very much an aging population, and with no disrespect to those who are of a certain age group, their ability to go through the mobile phone and to scroll through the carousels and everything is not the same as what a millennial or post-millennial would do so. So when you're saying the word consumer, it really needs to go into the demographic as well, the age group.
I would agree completely. I mean, I think that's true both from an East and a West perspective. Perhaps the only maybe benefit for an Eastern perspective is that the whole structure is a little bit busier for a user in the East already. So even if it's a millennial or even if it's a grey user, they should probably be a little bit more used to that. You take, say, maybe a more seasoned silver surfer from the West and you show them the Chinese portal. It's going to be very challenging. So I think for brands, absolutely, they need to decide which is going to be what is my key audience. It doesn't necessarily mean that, for example, kind of content needs to be shaped, or you can have a different site or a different destination depending on geography or depending on demographic. But consideration for the target user definitely needs to be considered for sure. It's a very, very good point. Okay, so just some more examples in terms of how interaction varies. Now this is a very interesting point, and it's quite topical. So what we've kind of seen in China is in essence it becoming a cashless society. So a survey was undertaken, I think, in the last 8 months, and it asked users how long do they think they could survive with 100 kuai, about 2020. How long do they think they could get by just with that? If I asked you guys the same question, how long do you think you could make $20 last you? What would you say? 2 days?
1 day.
1 day? 1 day, 2 days? Okay. So in China, 74% felt they could live for more than a week just with 100 kuai. It was the 20 bucks. And we'll go through this in a little bit more detail, specifically from a Singapore perspective.
This won't be in the major city, I guess, countryside.
Even countryside, I'll show some examples later. And I mean, I also use personal examples. I mean, I think I've gone out a few times in Shanghai and not had any money on me, and as long as my phone's on full charge, I'm not so concerned. In Singapore, absolutely have to go back and get a wallet. It's like, there's no question about that. So people are a lot more used to kind of, not needing cash so much. And you get to scenarios sometimes you'll go into a restaurant and you'll pay with cash and kind of might have any change because cash has become very, 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 very rare. And it's really changed that kind of side. Not just in the tier 1 cities, but also in the lesser tiers. Some of the examples I'll show you will demonstrate why this has happened. It also talks about this idea of how worried you might be if you don't have any cash with you. And again, a lot of people feel pretty relaxed about not necessarily having a huge amount of cash with them. So in essence, what we've seen happening in China is it's just really led the way with mobile payments. What we've kind of seen is, and there's a number of reasons for this. One of the key probably drivers from that is that credit cards didn't really gain the same acceptance in China that they had in the West. So a lot of people have gone from cash to being simply banked, and then gone to cashless. Whereas in the West, in Singapore in particular, we've had that kind of use of credit cards, so we haven't necessarily needed to have cash on us because we've got a credit card with us. So China's pretty much leapfrogged credit cards, and in many aspects gone straight to mobile payments.
So just one question here. So what's the credit card fraud rate in China?
What's that?
Fraud rates in China for credit card misuse?
I don't know. I don't hear too much about it, so I don't think it's crazy. I'm sure there's ways of it being manipulated. I would suspect.
Yeah, I guess it would be very high as well.
Yeah.
Especially if we talk about the countryside, the cashless and all, there are a lot of misuse as well.
Sure. No, I mean, I think misuse goes.
People are not educated, how to do this.
Yeah.
It would be misuse.
Yeah. No, it's a very, very fair point. Yes.
So how do mobile payments work in China? I mean, here we usually put in the credit card or Visa debit card or something,
yeah,
where then the money is withdrawn from.
Yes.
So do they top up their Alipay account, or how does it work?
Generally, very similar to how you describe the configuration here. It will be linked to a bank account or a credit card, and that will allow topping up or automatically topping up to your account, which will then allow you to have your mobile payments. Now, one of the key drivers about why this has happened, or why it's become so prevalent, is not necessarily that I can purchase my train tickets or purchase high ticket items with my mobile phone. It's really the smaller mum and pop stores that has really enabled it. So I can kind of go out to a very small store that may not look at all technologically advanced, and I can pay with my mobile phone. That's really the key driver to being able to kind of get by on $20 for at least a week. And this is slowly starting to change in Southeast Asia. Now, currently, definitely the rest of Asia lags behind. So I think some of the data that's been released recently. I think that this is also changing. Is that cash is still preferable, but from a government, from a leadership perspective, there's obviously a big push to move towards cashless, both in terms of Singapore from an innovation perspective, from a cutting edge perspective, needs to kind of remain on that cusp, as well as kind of been catching up to other markets. I know the Prime Minister recently mentioned about almost being embarrassed when he sees Chinese visitors come into Singapore and having to pay cash for certain transactions. So if the goal comes from the top down, I think it's going to accelerate, and we're certainly starting to see accelerate in the last 12 months. So as I said, Southeast Asia is catching up. We probably see that on a number of different players. Grab for sure, I think is a very interesting proposition. Similar to what Professor Srini mentioned about Gojek in Indonesia, there's a number of different players competing for this space, and they may not necessarily be coming from a financial services background. I think Grab is a key example of that in terms of a diversified service offering. This idea of going to an app and finding many things I can do within an app, and obviously it's been backed by the market. I think there's $3 billion been invested into Grab in the last year. 200 million recently from a travel entity. So there's a lot of interest. And I think one of key features that Grab has, and it may not necessarily be leveraged too much at the moment, is peer-to-peer transfer. So I don't know if, I don't know how many of you guys use Grab on a regular basis, but from someone living outside of Singapore and also in Singapore, to me this is a killer feature. But I don't think too many people are using it. The parallel I would draw is if I went for a meal, say in Shanghai, typically somebody would pay, and then we'd all WeChat Pay transfer the money to them. Now I've tried this in Singapore in terms of,
banks does the peer-to-peer nowadays in Singapore.
They
All
do
the banks
indeed.
does.
They do. I mean, there's a few other examples. We'll talk about pay now in a moment. But I think in terms of a non-bank player coming into this space and potentially having a killer function, I think GrabPay is very
Grab
advantageous.
has a little bit caveats as well. For example, the GrabPay for the taxis and all.
Mhm.
Once you top up the GrabPay, there's no way you can get refund. If you say tomorrow you want to cancel it, they will their policy says there's no refund.
Yeah.
So you have to use it.
Mhm.
So it had happened with me as well. I want to just cancel my Grab account.
Yeah.
I had some bad experiences with it.
Yeah.
So they came out and said that I can't refund you the money. You have to use it.
Yeah. No, it's you've almost got to take a leap of faith into that platform. And there's a few other platforms I'll touch on later where I've been burnt as well. But you kind of got to. I think for someone like
It's a trade-off.
it's a trade-off. You've got to embrace the new technology and go with it. And I think Grab have done a very good smart evolution into this as well. The other one we see is Fave. So again, probably more of an F&B offering. Again, allowing transfer. As far as I know, there's no peer-to-peer transfer within Fave. Pay now, in terms of the original kind of bank interaction, has evolved from just being a peer-to-peer transfer to now being able to use it from a transactional perspective. I think what we're also seeing now is the government have been very smart at bringing out this common QR code, which means that we don't see this cluster of lots of different QR codes in different retail space, which is a very good infrastructure evolution. And even we've got some left field players like Singapore Airlines. They've looked to kind of introduce a points burner for them, but I think this could evolve into another payment methodology. So in essence, there's many different players trying to get into this space. It is really a land grab. What we see here in Singapore, we see in many other markets within Southeast Asia. So it's interesting times. I don't know who I'd bet on in terms of taking over the market.
Sooner or later they will consolidate.
They will, absolutely, for sure. There will be consolidation, but who will lead it?
Yeah,
not too sure.
you don't know.
Not too sure, but it's good. I mean, again, most of these developments have taken place within the last year. So I think try it yourselves. Try and see how far you can get by without having any cash in your pockets. And you'll be amazed. You may need to at this stage probably download maybe 2 or 3 different partners because there's not really one dominant partner. But you can get away without cash quite well at the moment. It's definitely improving. Okay, another point quite closely linked to this, and also talking about your example of losing a bit of money, is the sharing economy. So again, we've obviously seen, I guess the overarching point of this is mobile is the wallet for the sharing economy. Everything is driven from mobile. We've obviously seen it from a bike sharing perspective in terms of how it's rolled out. The other thing about, again, touching on one of the points I mentioned earlier about data and users' willingness to share. It's very much, there seems to be a greater disposition in China and in Asia to share things compared to say the West. And I think that's helping drive a lot of the growth of sharing economies and sharing infrastructure and sharing kind of multi-systems. So it's really the Chinese user, and I think it's also probably true for the Southeast Asian user, sees a lot of benefit for that. So that's allowed this proliferation of sharing services to kind of grow very, very quickly. Now, this obviously started in the East and it's gone to the West, and the West is slowly catching up. Definitely slowly catching up. The interesting thing is that sharing per se is not necessarily something completely new in the West. I remember going to Melbourne in Australia many years ago, taking a taxi and being on the way to a meeting, and suddenly halfway through my taxi journey, the taxi pulls over and someone else jumps in. And someone explained to me there's a scheme that people share taxis, and this was pre kind of smartphones, pre kind of was going on. So it's not necessarily new in the West. It's just it's been maybe repackaged and reconfigured in the East, and now it's kind of going a little bit more globally. Now it is an evolution. It is an evolution for players. We've kind of seen, and it's true both in China and particularly here in Singapore. We've seen a lot of excitement and overinvestment from VC companies into particular sharing ways of working. And we've seen here in certainly in China in terms of overinvestment, this oversupply. I think we've seen it kind of been limited by the government here. I think Offo's been limited to maybe 10,000 bikes now in Singapore, just to try and get a lot of bikes off the road, particularly ones with no saddles. But it is an evolution of the service. So we kind of go from this innovation through to this refinement, and then we end up with learning. So we see this evolution of bikes and products just through having feedback from users. So this kind of generation has just come out in China. It's won a Red Dot Award for design. It's really really nice. Some of the motorbikes we see in Singapore with the gears, it's an evolution. It's really kind of allowing the share economy to learn, to accelerate from users, and to then feed that back into product design, which is very good to hear and very good to see as well. Now, sharing economy has also spun off into other areas. There's an example from China where you can go to a basketball court, you can rent a basketball by the hour. So you don't need to bring a basketball to the court. You've kind of got this idea of sharing economy. So it's definitely proliferated around, and a lot of it is based upon this mindset of many Chinese users that they're willing to share. They're willing to kind of do things a little bit differently because there is a return, there is a benefit for that. But not everything works. This is an example also from China where you could share an umbrella, but no one wanted to get the umbrellas back. So all the umbrellas pretty much disappeared. I think it was probably a facet of maybe the deposit not being so linked to that. So the sharing economy is evolving, and the key driver or the key kind of centerpiece of the sharing economy does remain the mobile device. Okay, getting towards the end. I know probably people are maybe getting a little bit hungry and everything like that, but I'll slowly wrapping up. I want to share a couple of points on AI in terms of how that's evolving and what's happening in this space. It is particularly interesting. So, chatbots is certainly something that we've seen as maybe been a Western technology in terms of something that's been developed in the West and something we can take learning from. What we're starting to see now is that they've been adapted for the Asian environment, and they're becoming a lot more kind of localized here, which is getting very interesting. This is an example from Toyota through their brand Infinity, of where they've created a kind of a chatbot that was created in the West, but then needed to be adapted to the East. So when it was created in the West, the interface for it was on Facebook Messenger. So when it was changed to be rolled out in the East, it needed to be changed to run on WeChat. So that was one interaction. There was obviously the language difference as well that took place, but then there's also a need to have the intelligence sitting behind it. So within the artificial intelligence and natural language processing kind of mindset, Google has done great things. It's done fantastic things, but Google not being accessible in China has made this a non-viable option. So what we're starting to see now in China is alternatives to that spring up. And I think what we see done from simplified Chinese is also going to be relevant to other double byte characters here in Asia. So there's a lot of learnings to take place from it. One of the interesting anecdotes that's come out of this, and it goes back to one of the points you mentioned on data and insight, is that we've had this running for a number of months now, and what we found out one day is suddenly a user was typing in a pre-designated term, in this case independent brake systems, and suddenly the chatbot was not responding anymore. I think, well, why has it stopped responding? So we basically had to go back to the natural language processor experts, the entity whose service we were using, and we found out that the term independent had now been banned. So this is kind of government oversight in terms of not wanting people to be talking about independent, whether it was Tibet or Taiwan or anything like that, but it's just deemed a rogue word, even though in this instance it had absolutely nothing to do with the car. It was just a kind of word on that. So this kind of goes back to, you have a lot of innovation happening within the market, but you still have government oversight, which shapes the way the brands can do things. Not in a major way, but it's just something to be aware of. Okay, just to wrap up now, and before I maybe turn over to some questions. Some takeaways. This is really driven at marketers to think about how they should embrace mobile. So, as I said up front, is to understand what has been done by the brand at the start. What is currently in play? Try to make the most of that. The second thing is to use the adage, Rome wasn't built in a day. It is to take baby steps, take things one step at a time. Don't try and be too advantageous or too aggressive in terms of what's been done. So maybe you don't necessarily need a chatbot straight away. Maybe you just need to ramp up your HTML5 site to give consideration to deploying on a messaging platform. What we're also seeing as mobile has become more mature is that the ownership of mobile doesn't just reside within the marketing space. It's really required innovation teams, technology teams. So as marketers, there's a need to kind of interact with other departments to make the mobile platform work. As I said, it is also a platform play. So it's really about integrating, and it's really about thinking about what will I do in mobile, not just this year, but what will I do in the next 2 or 3 years? How will I evolve it? What will I present it from a content perspective? What are my goals? What are my KPIs? What returns do I need from it as a channel? So really give a think about that and roll it out progressively. And I think I think the leapfrogging that we've seen and that continues to happen in China and elsewhere means that change is a constant. So we've kind of seen the last 2 or 3 years, WeChat has become very exciting. I'm pretty sure in 3 or 4 years' time, something will come to the table. It won't necessarily replace WeChat, but there'll be a different dynamic. So there's always change. So I think it's always important to understand what's happening in other markets. Whether it's looking at Gojek in Indonesia or looking to see what's happening and taking learnings in terms of seeing what these disruptors are bringing to the marketplace and see what can be learned from them. On that note, I will basically ask any questions, feedback, or comments. Yes.
Yes. You mentioned that in the US there are 77%, or US people spend 77% of their time on 3 apps.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems that the super apps make sense in the West. And looking at the trends, a lot of the apps, super apps in this case, are moving to lifestyle apps. Is there certain attributes or preference in the West where you see obstacles of super app being created? Because it seems to make sense, but we don't really see much examples of that happening in the West.
And I think it's driven by the consumer in terms of them not necessarily having the patience to kind of have to go to an app store and kind of think, which one do I download? And the brand seeing that, okay, if I want the user to interact with me, I need to simplify things a lot more. So it's probably a functional need, but a simplified functional need. So I have a one-stop shop. I go to the app store, I do a search for DBS, I download my DBS app, I'm kind of good to go. I don't need to worry about, is it DBS rewards, is it DBS going overseas, these types of things. So it's a simplification to make things easier for the user to interact with the brand.
So the West doesn't necessarily have to replicate the WeChat ecosystem in this case.
No, I mean I think what we'll see is, or what I think we're definitely seeing is, particularly in Silicon Valley, is that I guess there's an observation in terms of what's happening in the East, in terms of thinking about, okay, what's happening, what's good and what's bad. And not everything about WeChat is fantastic. I think if you, as a first-time user, open up WeChat, it's confusing as hell.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
But that's true for every Chinese mobile app at the website.
True.
You look at the Lazada.com,
True.
the Q10.com,
True.
they're so cluttered.
True.
There's so many things.
True. I mean, even to some extent, I'd have to say that Grab is a little bit guilty of that. They have improved it a little bit. If you want to get access to Grab Pay, you kind of need to think a
The
little bit
Grab
about
nowadays
it.
as well, I mean, Grab is also cluttered with so many
It's
things,
cluttered.
they just keep
It's
pushing all the
cluttered.
time.
And that's exactly what how Tencent have evolved. That's the advantage of the innovative nature of the economy. You can add a new service, see how it works, and some services have almost been thrown at the consumer in terms of, you know, there's the kind of almost the pseudo dating app where you can see who's around you, and that functionality has been added on, but the UX hasn't really been optimized in the same way the super app has been optimized to kind of allow users to come in for different ways. So even if I want to make a payment, it's still a couple of clicks for me to make a payment. So it's confusing to new users. The good thing is existing users have grown with this. They've known how to navigate it for 3 or 4 years. So whether it's just sending messaging, paying bills, checking bus timetables, they've evolved that they're used to. But first time users, it's confusing as all hell, for sure. Yes.
Can I just ask, because so far you've been talking from the major suppliers and also common users, right?
Mhm.
But from the enterprise's point of view, for most of the businesses out there,
Mhm.
how can they leverage on this within a reasonable budget? And
Mhm.
do they do it the DIY way, or do they have to go to an outsourced vendor to help themselves?
Mhm.
So that space, right?
Mhm.
How do we cater to let them leverage on this mobile technology?
I think we see approached in a number of different ways. I think ultimately brands probably need to pull in external expertise initially to probably assist them, at least from a strategic direction perspective. But what we often see is brands will maybe seek some outside assistance initially, but then they'll look to run things themselves thereafter. So it's kind of like a build, own, transfer type of approach. It'll be built externally, then managed internally, and then often internal teams will kind of run things and grow them from there. And so it's probably a very common approach for an entrepreneur, particularly if they're building a product. They may seek help with the product. Once the product's matured, they'll build a team around that to maintain them and grow the product. So I think it kind of depends on whether it's a product play or if it's from a pure branding perspective. I think it's that classic dilemma of, do I keep things in-house, or do I and pull that, I'll purchase that expertise and build that as a core skill set, or do I need to rely upon external experts to do that? Now, budgets don't need to necessarily be crazy in terms of, going back to considering to build a native app versus a mobile website. So a native app, because you have to deploy it on 2 platforms, it's a little bit more cost prohibitive. A mobile website, only needing to be deployed on a single platform is a lot simpler way of doing things. So I think it kind of depends on budgets and needs, and whether there's a goal to build that expertise in-house, or to pull in expertise from a consultationary perspective. Did that answer?
Yeah, but at the end of the day, whether in or out-house, whether it's in-house or outsourced, right? What is the deliverable at the end for any entrepreneurs? What are they buying?
I guess they're buying consumers' eyeballs.
Oh,
So what we kind of mentioned in the beginning is us as users, as consumers, we're spending a lot more time on mobile. So to brands, for them to be able to reach out to users, they need to kind of be on mobile. Otherwise, they're probably not going to be able to capture that user so easily. In the same way they may have considered TV and print and even radio back in the day, mobile's now become a lot more important. So it really is. The brand is enabling interaction time with the consumer by having a mobile strategy or a mobile approach.
WeChat has about 1 billion users per month.
Yeah.
How can we leverage on WeChat to more proactively market our products? Because WeChat, we have got to look for it, we've got to search for it. Is there a way that you could suggest that we could more leverage on WeChat proactively?
In terms of wanting to reach out to those billion users?
Yeah, I mean for our products. Yeah.
I think what is happening is if you as a brand have a large target audience within China, probably the users will want to reach out to you within WeChat. So you almost need to have a kind of presence there for them to reach out to you. So there's probably the first kind of I guess basic way of doing that is to have a WeChat official account. It's kind of almost set up a presence there, which then allows you to have a little bit of kind of content on that. If it's becoming, a good way to interact, then it could warrant a further investment, whether it's in terms of having like a WeShop, so in terms of having an e-commerce site within WeChat. It's really a case of not recommending a jump into the deep end. It's really kind of test the water, build a WeChat official account, see what sort of interaction you're getting with consumers on that. If that's making sense, maybe consider a smaller kind of WeShop environment, see how consumers are finding that, and then hopefully what you'll find out is that it becomes a viable channel for interaction with the users, and maybe it's also a viable channel for commerce in comparison to some of your traditional channels, whether that's pure web or whether that's also native app or that type of interaction.
Would engaging bloggers work?
Engaging with bloggers is very good from an influence building perspective. So in terms of for example, if you were to engage with a Chinese blogger, for example, the tag on the end of that would probably be, find out more about this particular brand via their WeChat official account. So almost see the blogger as a way of building interest in your account, but from an infrastructure perspective, you probably want to have the account there in the first place, so that brands can build out. So the bloggers would almost be amplifying your presence and driving users through to it.
So we are unable to do a push factor.
You can do a push, but you need to have the users on that platform first to be able to push it. So I guess it's similar to kind of some other channels, even Facebook, for example. You need to build a platform, then you need to drive users through to that platform. And some of that will definitely come from bloggers' perspective. But once you build that critical mass, you can definitely push content out to them. And users will appreciate the content. If it's a brand they value, it's a brand they appreciate having communications from. If there's a broadcast message going out once or twice a month, they will value that for sure.
The AI would be the best in this case, using the artificial intelligence, because the user community is very huge.
Yeah.
So you need to target the interested people in the product. So how will you find out who are the people who are interested in the product?
I mean,
if you just broadcast, I don't think it will get attention with user.
Yeah, I mean the challenge one of the good things about WeChat from a platform perspective is that you're only broadcasting to users that follow you. So it's only similar to Facebook. You're only communicating to users that follow you. The challenge is, how do you find those users in the first place?
Facebook has a difference here. Facebook does do analysis of your history, of your browser history. So let's say, for example, if you do and book an air ticket on your browser today, and you go on open a Facebook, you will see similar air travel, airline popping up there. So they're definitely doing AI on your browsing history.
Yes.
And that's how they're correlating the marketing stuff.
Yes.
And that probably, I'm not sure whether WeChat is AI is there or not, but AI is the one which definitely helped to do the marketing for my product, because it reaches the target audience.
No, I think the intelligence of reviewing browser history or Facebook history in terms of being able to present ads back to you is very permanent. So I think media and bought media is a very good way of building a user base. You definitely can't rely purely on bloggers. You probably have to have existing media and existing channels to drive users to follow your account. And once they're following your account, then you can have the interaction with them.
And today's world, the user will also become smart. They know that there is a paid advertisement.
Yeah.
They all are aware of all those things as well. So it doesn't work all the time.
No, for sure. I mean, the user can kind of get a bit cynical. Suddenly I've been browsing this, I jump on Facebook,
absolutely.
The intelligence is there.
Okay, very good. Yeah, thank you, Liam. Yeah,
No problem at all.
let's give it a